many on the opposing side were for intervention, but when people were asking them points of information, they didn't like that kind of intervention. Now, look, usually I felt maybe I'll deliver a powerful rhetorical speech in the manner which you guys are so used to. But as I got older, I find myself just becoming more and more a glorified fact checker. Boring facts, but facts nonetheless. Facts that challenge false hypotheses. Because the only way you can challenge a false hypothesis is by presenting evidence that just goes against it, refutes it. And this debate really is not about is Western civilization evil? Sometimes that's people might assume that's what this debate might be about because its interventions are evil or not, depending on which side you want to be on. It's not about that. Western civilization, collection of states that were united by some similar cultures in a similar cultural area, are collectives of peoples with varying different motivations. No one is all evil. However, you can look at systems, government, and the games of power that might tempt people to certain actions, and that's what we're going to look at. This is not a debate about trade and diplomacy. The states throughout the world were engaging in trade and diplomacy. No one calls trading with your partners, nations, or others intervention. So it's not about trade, diplomacy, or mediation when you want to mediate between conflicts. That's not what everyone thinks when they see the word interventionism on the poster when you came. This is about military and political intervention into other people's nations. By political, I mean you uproot and change the political society, or you do not allow, or you disrupt the people in that society deciding their own political system when they have the choice. Now, this debate is not about has Western civilization, or any of the Western states, ever done anything good in the world? No, we're not debating this. We're looking at the majority of times, the vast majority of times. Now, good luck arguing with the examiner that you shouldn't have failed your exam because you got one question right on it, your name, right? That's not going to fly, is it? Someone's like, oh, damn. Yeah? It's the rest of the questions that we need to look at, the big questions. And of course, this debate is not about the complete absence of Western intervention, just its decline from what it was before. That's really what this is about, because the title is Decline. Is not this house would celebrate the end of Western interventionism. So we can argue based on the title. Now, inherent in the problem of Western interventionism are three main things: motivation and aim, capability, and method. And in all three, Western political systems have been unable to deliver just interventions for the vast majority around the world. Let's look at motivation aim. Intervening costs money. It costs a lot of money to send your army around the world. So how do you recuperate that money? Well, you try to find some lucrative interventions. Oh, but what if the people don't like your new political system you're going to create for them that seems to coincidentally have your corporations benefiting from it, and they decide to go with other corporations? Well, you're going to have to intervene some more until you can pay the bill that they never asked you for your services in the first place. And therein lies the main cause of, you could say, evil. Evil's not done like comic book villains with capes and tall hats and laughing maniacally. Evil is done because people think it's necessary in the achievement of their goals. And they are able to pay any price, as Madeleine Albright said, including 500,000 children, if need be, for their greater good, or what they call the national interest, which is their God. You could say they're false idols. All right. So what about aim? What about the ideals? We're spreading the ideals of Western civilization around the world. Well, not necessarily technology. I mean, there are many cases where the British Army in India discovered that their opponents had superior technology to themselves, like rocket technology, where it was kind of taken from the Indians a little bit. But that didn't say, oh, well, they have better technology now, so let's just go back to England. No, they decided they insisted, and they obviously conquered a land that was quite wealthy and prosperous. And of course, what happened after that conquest, it wasn't so wealthy and prosperous anymore. But the East India Company was quite wealthy after that, so, they benefited. So I guess their lives were improved. They got to have nice little stately mansions, so I suppose that was good, right? Well, for them anyway. And also this argument that we have to go around and spread ideals at the point of a gun or the sword. Doesn't that sound like forced conversion? We must force convert the world to agree with us. Our ideals are so weak and so unpersuasive that we have to go and bomb people and kill people in order for them to embrace it. Do you know what message that sends to the world about Western values? Not a very good one, right? And of course, arguing that they are universal is very sad because everyone says their values are universal, right? And now you're just arguing that your values are just supremacist against others, without making the case why your values are more rational and make more sense according to some objective basis. Let's take the example of women's roles in LGBT. In Egypt, when the British came, they discovered that the Egyptian people had female doctors. This is about 100 years ago in the Victorian times. Female doctors, that's very un-British. We don't put our women to be doctors, so they abolished it. So they brought civilization to the Egyptians. They abolished female doctors, and of course introduced law codes, the Napoleonic law code and others, which had these, and of course other law codes, which brought in a term that had never existed in the Middle East and many other countries before, the homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual, all these nomenclature, which was invented in the 19th century, by the way, very recent time. So they said, okay, we have a name for a certain type of person that has a certain type of proclivity, and now you can prosecute them. Whereas before, there was no category, and therefore no discrimination. I always say there was no discrimination because we didn't discriminate people by such categories in the first place. They brought that, that's a Western import, into the Muslim world. We didn't have such a categorization based on sexual proclivities or tastes. What about capability? The West does not have the capability to go to other countries who are beyond their civilizational ken and understand their mentality enough and relate to them enough to be able to change the local politics. Maybe the West is very good intervening in other countries in the West because they share similar background, but countries around the world just don't understand all the mindsets. Of course, what happens is you make very big errors if that's what you want to do. And of course, the method of going in by unannounced bombing and killing and so on and so forth. And of course, since the enemy, quote unquote, who you've now designated, obviously there are civilians around them, you're faced with a choice. Shall I risk our troops, sending our troops in to clear out the enemy building by building, for example, which might lead to a higher body count and unfavourable ratings in the public at home? Or do we just bomb whole areas and save our troops' lives? Well, let's go for option B, always option B. Just like what's happening in Palestine now, in Gaza. Option B all the way. Let's just bomb whole areas, not even giving warning, and killing civilians. That doesn't make people very happy on the receiving end. Track records. I can go on and on, just on the track records. But you have to kind of go all the way back, 100, 200 years for the first Western interventions, which created the modern world, which created the idea of the nation state, that a state represents one ethno-cultural linguistic group. All sounds quite a civilized way to divide up the world. Problem is, the world has a mix of cultural linguistic groups, and they never had an idea that you should base a state representing one particular cultural and ethno-linguistic group. And what that leads to, a simple question that arises in every country that you build or create, which is, whose ethno-linguistic group does the nation represent? Because there's multiple. And therefore, what happens as a consequence is civil wars, endless civil wars. Burma, multiple nations and ethno-linguistic groups all fighting. There's apparently three civil wars. There's three civil wars in Burma at the moment with multiple factions. Right? India, there was no such idea as a demographic called the Hindu and the Muslim and the Christian until the British came there. Right? But of course, when they came, they made these delineations, and then likewise, ethno-nationalism emerged based on these categories. In Iraq, because America was facing a united insurgency from both Sunni and Shia insurgents, what did they do? Well, divide and conquer. Okay, guys, we're going to give the Sunnis some privileges here. We're going to give the Shia some privileges there, if you work with us. And of course, then they turned them against each other. And the sectarian massacres that occurred led directly to the rise of ISIS in the Sunni areas, who were protesting against the Shia discrimination and oppression against them. And I could go on and on. I don't need to mention Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on, of course, France, and so on and so forth. But these are issues that we need to remember, right? Humanitarian aid. There's many complaints about humanitarian aid that it leads directly to dependency from the population. And of course then political leverage, hell surprise. So this is, and of course, you know, if the West has been doing such a great job, and you know, obviously we hear many, some right-wing kind of arguments against, arguments supporting interventionism, but at the same time, we see right-wing arguments against, what's all these refugees and migrants coming at our doors? Where did they come from? What utopia did we create that they came from? Well, they didn't come from a utopia. They didn't come from the multiple Scandinavians you create around the world. There is no utopia that you've created around the world. That's the issue. And lastly, of course, look at the world that colonialism built. A world where 50% of the wealth, of the assets of the world, belong to 1% of the world's population. And of course, 50% of the world's population only owning 1% of the world's wealth. That is the world that interventionism built. And I'll leave it like this. The word "we" was used, right? Like we. We've been doing these things, we've done this, we've made mistakes, we. This debate is not about condemning anyone here. In fact, this debate is about this kind of divesting yourself from being under this umbrella called we. It is not you that believed in these things, in killing and massacring and invading. It's not you that committed these conquests, right? It's not us, it's not we. So when you come to voting, please make that known and vote for the opposition. Thank you.